Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the July edition of the Water Quality Advisory Workgroup meeting. Hopefully you're seeing and hearing me on your computer screens. My name is Greg Easley. I'm the section manager of the Water Quality Assessment section in the Water Quality Division of the Tceq, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's meeting. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And obviously, we're trying out a new format here, going completely virtual with this meeting. We were unfortunately not able to do our April meeting. The previous quarter had to cancel that meeting because I guess we were kind of in the height of the COVID-19 situation. But obviously, we were able to do this virtually, and so thanks for working with us as we try out this this new tool, Microsoft Teams Live, and also getting back on track with our quarterly meetings. So thank you for joining us. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to send an email to our outreach email box, which is outreach@tceq.texas.gov. And it's also listed near the bottom of the meeting agenda. Just send your name and affiliation to that email address, and we'll be able to register your attendance for the meeting, and we appreciate that. So as I mentioned, this is the first time we've tried out this platform, Teams Live, and hopefully it'll work out well for everyone. But we do encourage you as we go through the meeting and after it's over, if you have any constructive feedback for us as far as what worked well, what may not have worked well, we would like to hear those comments. So you can also send those type of comments to our outreach email box that I mentioned earlier. So before we dive into the meeting topics, I wanted to say a few other things about this this meeting platform, Teams Live. It is the first time we've tried it in our division for this type of meeting. So again, hope everything goes smoothly. You should have received, if you registered for the meeting, a handout, or I guess an electronic file that is sort of a how-to document on how to use the platform. You know, how to turn on captions and send questions, that sort of thing. So hopefully you had a chance to read through that and make your experience that much better. But in general, you will not be able to, well, you'll be able to see and hear us on our end, the presenter end, but we can't see or hear you. So the mode of interaction that is allowed with this platform is you'll be able to type in questions or comments in the questions and answers panel that is available to you with this platform. So if you haven't already found it, there's a toolbar of sorts that has an icon with two call-out boxes. One has a question mark symbol in it, and if you click that, it'll bring up the Q&A panel. So that's how we're going to be interacting today in this medium. So as we go through the meeting, feel free to type in questions, and we'll respond to those closer to the end of the meeting. But I guess the other thing I wanted to mention is that basically, as far as the game plan for the meeting, we're going to go through the topics on the agenda, which should be displayed on the screen right now. And hopefully you've got your own copy as well to refer to as we go through the meeting. But as we go through each topic, each presenter will give their presentation verbally. There won't be any slides or PowerPoint slides of anything of that nature. So essentially just be a verbal audio presentation. And when one speaker is done, we'll go to the next one in succession until we get down to the bottom of the list. And at that point, that's when we'll take questions. So all the questions that have been submitted up to that point, and during that time, we'll go through one by one and respond to those. So again, you're welcome to type in your questions as they come to you. You know, as a certain speaker is talking about a particular subject, you can type in your questions, and it'll hold them for us until we get to that Q&A part of the meeting after all the presentations have been given. Normally, when we do this quarterly meeting in person, we'll go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. But obviously, since we're using this different platform, we can't exactly do that. So as each new speaker from the agency comes on your screen, they'll introduce themselves so you know who they are. And then after the meeting's over, we'll send out and post on our website, the WQAWG website, which is the link to it's given near the bottom of your agenda. We'll post a list of all the attendees in case you're interested in getting that information after the meeting's over. So, and then also along with that, we'll with the meeting attendee list, we'll also post the meeting summary that you can access there, and there will also be a recording of this meeting, video recording of this meeting and audio that will be available on the TCQ YouTube channel, which a link to that I believe is also given on the agenda near the bottom. So you'll have those resources after the fact to go back to if you need to. I believe that's all that I wanted to say to start out with things. So we will now start going through the different topics on the agenda. And first up, we've got David Galindo presenting on discharge of plastics in wastewater. So I'll hand it over to David.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm David Galindo. I'm the director of the Water Quality Division, and I want to take the opportunity to give an abbreviated summary of our June 30th implementation procedure stakeholder meeting. During this meeting, we discussed plastics, specifically plastic pellets, manufactured at organic chemical manufacturing facilities that are then used to be formed into other plastic products. And so we are looking at an initiative to clarify language within wastewater discharge permits that clearly prohibits the discharge of plastics. And so, as I mentioned, we're focusing on plastic pellets, powder, and flakes that are present in visible amounts, visible meaning visible to the naked eye. And so I didn't want to go into all the detail of our discussion because I will provide at the end here a link where you can find the presentation from that discussion and a list of questions that we had put out to stakeholders requesting input on. But some of the things that we are looking at doing are updating our wastewater permit applications to identify facilities that handle plastics, either produce plastics or are formers of that take the plastic pellets and then form them into other products. We are looking at including language-specific requirements in stormwater permits regarding inclusion of best management practices for materials handling areas and housekeeping, with the objective of keeping plastic pellets, flakes, and powder out of stormwater runoff, which then could carry that material to receiving waters. And then also we are looking at including an actual prohibition within the water quality standards. Our implementation procedures are running parallel. The development of our implementation procedures are running parallel with the water quality standards. And so, depending on the feedback that we get back from stakeholders, and particularly defining a clear definition of what plastics that we are intending to prohibit, then we could use that language and actually propose a prohibition and a definition of plastics within the water quality standards. And so please stay tuned with that standards process. And if we do propose that, there may actually be some further discussion of that through that standards development process. And so just want to remind everyone, as we move forward to include provisions within our implementation procedures, the implementation procedures ultimately, once they are approved by the commissioners for publication, they would go out for public comment. And so you would have the opportunity to provide formal comments on that document and this proposal for plastics and any other proposals that we have that we would be including in this next revision of the implementation procedures. And so the presentation that we provided for this discussion is available on our website. You can actually just go to the TCEQ website and search for the implementation procedures or search for the water quality standards. We have the information up on both those websites. And so the presentation is there, along with a list of items that we are requesting stakeholder input on. And so we provided a 30-day comment period, which is going to end on August the 10th. So please, if you didn't participate in the previous discussion, feel free to go to the website, take a look at the presentation and the items that we are requesting input on, and please feel free to comment on any of those items. We're asking for input on the definition of plastics, sources for best management practices related to controlling plastics and stormwater discharges, notification requirements if there are any unauthorized discharge of plastics. We're requesting input on what those requirements should be, as well as the point of compliance for controlling plastics on a facility. And then I think the last item that we're asking for input on is compliance periods. The water quality standards do allow for compliance periods, and so we're asking for input on if a compliance period is determined to be necessary for a facility to construct additional controls or implement their BMPs. We have standard requirements for compliance periods, which include quarterly reporting or quarterly progress reports to the agency, and so we're requesting input on that as well, and any additional requirements that may be in order or may be warranted to accompany a compliance period. So again, the presentation and the items that we are requesting input on, those are available on the implementation procedures and water quality standards websites. The best way to get there is just to go to our homepage and search for implementation procedures or search for water quality standards, and it'll take you to either of those sites. If you'd like to, or if you have any questions, you can, we'll be answering questions at the end, but also my direct line, my mobile number is 512-563-3909. Please feel free to call and on plastics or any other water quality related issue. So thank you for your time today, and I'm going to pass this back to Greg Easley. Greg, are you on mute? I think we may have lost Greg. So let's skip over Greg and go to Rebecca. Rebecca, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, this is Rebecca. I am the team leader for the Stormwater team. First of all, I'm going to give you an update on the Stormwater multi-sector general permit. So currently this permit is under renewal. This permit regulates stormwater discharges from industrial activities. The permit expires next year on August 14, 2021, and we started the renewal process last September in 2019. It takes about 2 years for us to process a stormwater permit, general permit renewal. So we started in September internally to work on the general permit, and in October of last year, we held a stakeholder meeting to figure out what items are important to all of you, to our stakeholders. We also went through an internal review process to find out any changes, proposed changes that other program areas at Tceq recommended. We also compiled everything that we've received throughout the permit cycle from permittees and permit investigators. So we drafted a permit and we send it up to EPA after internal review and our management approval. We send that permit over to EPA the middle of May for the review. They have 90 days to review that permit. So we expect comments back on middle of August from EPA. Hopefully we don't have many comments or any. Last permit cycle, we didn't receive any comments from them. We'll see what this permit cycle looks like. But basically, during the stakeholder meeting, we presented some proposed changes, and pretty much those are still on the table. We added a few more items. Basically, we are adding a whole bunch of tables. It looks like the permit got fatter, but really we added about 20 pages just because we added the North American Industry Classification System Code, or what we know as NAICS code, in addition to the SIC code tables. So now permittees have the ability to, or would have the ability to both see the SIC code and the NAICS code. So that's something that EPA's permit has, and our permit didn't have it, and we see that it's needed now. So we're pleased to propose to add that. Also, we added a few requirements that are going to be needed to be added to the notice of intent, that is the application, as well as the notice of change. So such things as complying with e-reporting requirements. For example, now you need to tell us if you are subject to federal categorical guidelines or if you have an inactive site. So just a few more things that we need on those forms. Also, we are very pleased that we're proposing to offer that delegation of signatories need to be filed online through STEERS. So instead of mailing those delegation of signatories via paper, we are proposing for approval to put this in the permit so that now you can go ahead and submit your delegation of signatories via STEERS. We're also clarifying a few items. For example, in Sector O, which is the steam electric, we're clarifying which facilities need to have requirements that require a DMR to be submitted. So right now, we don't have that very clear, so we're just making clarification on that. For Sector J, which is the mineral mining and processing sector, we are adding some BMPs that come directly from the construction general permit. So we're not adding anything new that we created. We're just taking those best management practices from the construction general permit that apply to those entities and moving them, not moving them, but including them also in Sector J in the MSGP. For example, outside vehicle tracking of sediments, generation of dust, dewatering of trenches. So BMPs to address those issues. Also for Sector L, which is the landfill and then application site sector, for that sector, we added some definitions to make clarifications on what we need because you know, we had some questions over the years. So we have definitions for what final cover is, intermediate cover, and then we replace the term trenches with units. And this is something that we work closely with the solid waste program area. For Sector Y, which is the rubber and plastics products in miscellaneous manufacturing facility sector, just as David said, we are also adding some best management practices to eliminate plastic materials in stormwater. Then we also added 2 benchmark values to the permit. So for Sector T, which is the treatment works sector, we lowered the BOD benchmark value from 20 milligrams per liter down to 15 milligrams per liter. As well as for Sector U, for the food and kindred product sector, for SIC codes only 2074 through 2079, we have lowered the TSS from 100 milligrams per liter to 50 milligrams per liter. Both of these benchmarks have been lowered based on the statistical analysis that we did based on the data that we received during the current permit cycle. So after we receive EPA's comments, we need to address any comments that are needed. And then once we receive approval from EPA, we will go through our management briefings and obtain permission to publish the permit. So currently we are proposing on our schedule to have the permit available for public comment during sometime late December to early January, depending on how things go. But for now, we are looking at publishing in the newspaper, a couple of newspapers, as well as the Texas Register, the multi-sector general permit for comments 30 days, and then we'll receive those comments from all of you as needed. We will revise them, address them, respond to comments. We will prepare the executive director's response to comments, and hopefully issue this permit by the deadline of next August. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laurie Fleet with the Tceq Wastewater Permitting Water Quality Division. I'm going to give quite a number of updates, as you can see from the agenda, on some general permits. For starting off, the Aquaculture General Permit, which is TXG 130000. We're starting the renewal with amendment process for that general permit. That permit authorizes discharges into or adjacent to water in the state from aquaculture facilities and other related activities. The primary amendment that we're going to be incorporating into this permit is to expand the applicability to include the new oyster mariculture program that was required by House Bill 1300 from the last legislative session. The current permit expires in April of 2021, so we're starting the process now. The next permit that I'll be covering is the concrete batch general permit, which is TXG 110000. It authorizes the discharge of facility wastewater and stormwater associated with industrial activities into or adjacent to water in the state from ready-mix concrete plants. Ready-mix concrete plants, concrete production plants, and their associated facilities. And again, that permit expires in November of 2021, and we're getting started on that one as well. The next one is the evaporation pond general permit, WQAWG 100,000. We are proposing to renew that permit, which authorizes wastewater generated by an industrial or water treatment facility into or adjacent to water in the state, which is being disposed of by evaporation from surface impoundments. The general permit does not authorize discharge of wastewater into water in the state. It's just adjacent to, I'm sorry. The current permit expires September of this year. The public comment period ended in March of 2020, and the commission is expected to take action on this permit on September 9th, 2020. Again, it's set for commissioner's agenda on September 9th, 2020. The next one is the amendment of the hydrostatic test general permit. No, let me back up. It's renewal. It is a renewal. Renewal of the hydrostatic test general permit. That permit was reissued on March 10th, 2020. The commission reissued that permit. It authorizes the discharge of hydrostatic test water from new vessels that contain raw water, potable water, or elemental gases and vessels that contain petroleum substances related to petroleum substances or waste related to petroleum substances. Permittees were required to submit a notice of intent to renew their authorization by July 6, 2020, to continue their authorization. If you failed to submit your NOI by that date, you will be required to submit a new authorization to discharge. The next permit is a new water treatment plant general permit. This is a new permit that we are proposing. It's TXG 640000. This new permit would authorize the discharge of wastewater generated as a result of conventional water treatment at water treatment facilities into or adjacent to water in the state. The public comment period ended in June of 2020, and the Commission is expected to take action on the proposed permit on October 7th, 2020. Renewal of the pesticide general permit, TXG 870000. The TCEQ is proposing to renew the pesticide general permit, which authorizes the application of pesticides into, over, or near water of the U.S. for the control of mosquito or other insect pest, vegetation and algae pest, animal pest, area-wide pest, and forest canopy pest. That permit expires in November of 2021. Again, we're starting the renewal process on that permit. So that's the general permits that I have at this time. So with that, if there's any question on any of those, or you need me to back up and re-say some of those dates that I discussed on each of those permits, you can just put a question in the comment field, and I'll cover those at the very end. So with that, I'll move on to our rule updates. Chapter 281. TCEQ initiated rulemaking to amend 30 Tceq 281.18 to provide an option for administrative deficiency notices to be sent to applicants via electronic mail. The purpose of this rulemaking was to try to expedite our permitting process and allow for more efficient means of communicating with applicants. Applications will not be returned unless at least one certified letter is sent to the applicant. So what we envision with this rule is that we could send an initial NOD letter to applicants, and then in the event that we don't get a response, if we don't get a response to the email, we would send a certified letter, which gives the applicant 30 days to respond. If there's no response within the 30 days of that certified letter, the application would be returned. The rule was proposed in the Texas Register in May of 2020, and the comment period ended in June. And the Commission is expected to take action on this rulemaking on October 7th, 2020. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah for an update on Chapter 319.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Johnson with the Industrial Permits team. The TCEQ initiated rulemaking to amend 30 Tceq Chapter 319, General Regulations Incorporated into Permits, to clarify the alternate test procedure, or ATP process, in accordance with the EPA's 2017 Clean Water Act Methods Update Rule. The proposed rulemaking would clarify the ATP procedure to align with federal rules in 40 CFR Part 136 for discharge permits, and would establish the state ATP procedure for TLAPs. Additional staff recommended changes include the removal of an obsolete section identified in the last rules review, removal of inconsistencies, improved rule structure, use of consistent terminology, and overall improved readability. The proposed rulemaking was published in the June 5th, 2020 issue of the Texas Register. The comment period closed on July 6th. No public comments were received. The program area is currently finalizing the proposed rules for adoption. It is scheduled to go before the commissioners on the October 21st, 2020 agenda, with an effective date of November 26th. And with that, I'll hand it off to Shelby.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelby Williams with the Land Application Team. I'm going to give you an update on the recent Chapter 342 rule change. That is the APO registration fee adjustment rule change that was based on House Bill 907 from the 86th legislative session, which increased the maximum annual registration fee for APOs from $1,000 to $1,500. The approval date of this rulemaking was on July 15th, 2020. The adopted rulemaking will be published in the July 31st issue of the Texas Register, and the effective date is August 6, 2020. The APO program has also been transferred from the Water Quality Division in the Office of Water to the Permitting and Registration Support Division in the Office of Waste. Next, I will speak on one of our current rule petitions. This one is for Chapter 217, the design criteria for domestic wastewater systems. On June 1st of 2020, the Commission received a petition from a Mr. James Thompson. The petitioner requests that the Commission amend 30 TAC Chapter 217 to allow the use of fiberglass pipe and reinforced thermoset resin pipes to be included in the design criteria for these wastewater systems. The petition request has been set on the Commissioner's agenda for July 29th, 2020 for consideration on approval or denial to initiate a rulemaking, and the backup material will be available on July 10th of 2020. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back off to Rebecca.
Hi, thank you, Shelby. So this is, again, I'm Rebecca. So I'm now giving you an update on the rule petition that is going to be affecting the stormwater program. So on June 15 of this year, we received the rule petition from the Texas Aggregate and Concrete Association, known as Tceq, as well as on June 23rd, we received a petition from the Lake Houston Area Grassroots Flood Prevention Initiative. So both of these petitions are similar in that they are requesting that the Commission adopt a new rule that would establish best management practices for commercial sand mining and other lawful purposes within the San Jacinto River watershed. So those two petitions are being processed together, and we are scheduled to take these petitions to Commissioner's agenda on August the 12th for their decision. The Executive Director currently is recommending approval of the petition to initiate a rulemaking with the stakeholder involvement. So through the stakeholder process, we will identify and evaluate the appropriate best management practices that are technically supported for the sand mining industry to control the discharge of pollutants within the stormwater discharges from the site. The rulemaking process would define specific areas within the watershed that would be regulated and would add a new chapter within 30 TAC Chapter 311, known as the Watershed Protection Rules. So that's a very brief update on that, those two rulemaking petitions. And as I said, on August the 12th, the Commissioners will make a decision on whether the Executive Director will proceed with this rulemaking or not. So based on the couple of rulemaking updates that Shelby and I gave you, if you would like any further information or details on the specific rule item, you can find that on our TCQ's homepage. There's a section that you can click on called Rules and Rulemaking. If you click on that link, then you will be able to further find these rule petitions there, so you can find more details on it and follow the process of the rulemaking. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. We'll now next move into the next section, and I apologize, this is Greg again. I got dropped off the call earlier, but kudos to my colleagues for keeping the show going. But anyway, I'll go ahead and introduce the next section here, which consists of program updates, and Lori Fleet will start it off for us, talking about biosolids and pre-treatment electronic reporting. Lori?
Hello again, everyone. Again, Laurie Fleet, and so I'm going to give an update on the biosolids and pre-treatment electronic reporting waiver. On June 11th, 2020, a letter was mailed out to all domestic wastewater permittees that were issued a permit on or after February 1st, 2016. On that same date, a letter was mailed to all approved pretreatment programs. The purpose of these letters is to serve as a waiver from the electronic reporting requirements to submit the biosolids annual report and the pretreatment annual report electronically. 40 CFR Part 127, which is the electronic reporting rule, requires these reports to be submitted electronically, and permits that are issued after February 1st of 2016 contained a requirement to submit those reports electronically. Unfortunately, EPA has not built out the electronic reporting tool at this time. They are working on it, at least on the biosolids annual report, but development hasn't started on the pretreatment annual report. And so the biosolids waiver does not apply. I'm going to say that again. The biosolids waiver does not apply to your discharge monitoring report requirements, including those discharge monitoring requirements related to sludge outfalls. And so all outfalls for biosolids DMRs must be reported using the Net Dmr reporting system. If you stop using the Net Dmr system to report your sludge outfalls, it will be considered a non-receipt violation. So again, this waiver is from submitting your entire report electronically, but you should continue to submit all your DMRs, including your sludge DMRs, electronically. The waiver applies to the supporting documents that are currently submitted in paper format, such as your certification statements and your lab reports. So essentially, it's business as usual. Submit your paper format in paper and continue submitting your DMRs in DMR format electronically. The waiver only applies for the annual report that's due this year in September of 2020. The waiver expires at the end of this year, so beginning in September of 21, the electronic biosolids annual report will be available and will be required. So for this year, September of 2020, for biosolids, it's business as usual. And EPA has assured us that we will have an electronic reporting tool for the biosolids annual report by September of 2021, and so you'll be required to use that electronic report. EPA, again, as I mentioned, has not started development of the electronic pretreatment annual report. The pretreatment waiver extends through December of 2023, and permittees should continue submitting the pretreatment annual report in paper format until December of 2023. So again, if there's any questions on those dates or how those waivers, what they're waiving and what they're not waiving, if you have any questions on that, be sure and put that in the Q&A question section, and we'll address those at the very end. Moving on to the next topic, which is House Bill 2771. House Bill 2771 requires TCEQ to submit a request to EPA for regulatory authority for oil and gas discharges into water in the state. That project is going to require a number of steps, some of which we've already accomplished. So some of those steps include rulemaking to adopt EPA's oil and gas effluent limitation guidelines. That rulemaking was adopted by the Commission in May of 2020, so that project is complete. We also had to do a rulemaking to amend our memorandum of understanding between the TCEQ and the Railroad Commission regarding the oil and gas jurisdiction. That rule was adopted by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality on June 10th, and the Railroad Commission adopted the rule on June 16th, 2020. Our Npds application for oil and gas authorization, we're currently conducting internal reviews. We've been working over the last almost year now developing that application. It is going through our internal reviews. Once our reviews are completed, it'll be submitted to the Office of the Attorney General to develop the Statement of Legal Authority. And once they've completed their Statement of Legal Authority, it'll go to the Governor's Office, who essentially submits it to the EPA. Right now, we're projecting that we will submit our application for oil and gas authorization to EPA in September, October of 2020. That's almost a year ahead of what the bill required. The bill required us to submit the application by September of 2021. So we're ahead of schedule on submitting that to EPA. One of the other things that we needed to do was, I guess you'd call it clean up our memorandum of agreement with EPA. Our memorandum of agreement was last signed back in 1998. As you can imagine, there were a number of outdated things in there. Even the name of our agency was different 22 years ago. So what we did is we developed a revised memorandum of agreement. Those revisions were non-substantive. And so that document we submitted to EPA because it was non-substantive. They were able to review it and execute that memorandum of agreement on June 11th, 2020. Transfer of jurisdiction regarding oil and gas discharges will be addressed in the addendum that'll be included in our application that I just discussed. So there'll be yet another revision of the memorandum of agreement that's part of our delegation application request. This change we just did was simply a non-substantive update to bring that 98 document up to today's standards and today's information. And the last project that we're doing as it relates to implementing House Bill 2771 is amending the hydrostatic test general permit, which is TXG 670000. As I mentioned above, when we were talking about the general permit renewals and amendments, we just recently renewed that general permit. So this action here is only an amendment. So we are amending without renewal. The purpose of those amendments is to expand the permit applicability to include hydrostatic tests from oil and gas facilities upon delegation of those discharges from EPA. EPA approved our draft permit in June, and the public notice and comment period is currently open and will end on August 3rd, 2020. Again, as I mentioned, the general permit is being amended without renewal. So all those entities that are authorized under the existing general permit that we issued in April, they are not required to submit a new NOI. Their authorization will continue. They'll just continue to operate under the terms and conditions of the existing general permit that was issued in April. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's staying safe and happy. I will be discussing our proposed revisions to our procedures to implement the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards, and we just call that IPs for short. We conducted 2 stakeholder meetings, one on March 9th and one on June 30th, and we are accepting comments on our IP revisions. You can find updates to our webpage. If you do a search on our TCEQ homepage, if you search implementation procedures, that'll take you to our page that has some updates with updated proposed revisions and some other things that are handy to review that I'll get into in just a moment. If you do have comments for us, please send those comments to ipcomment@tceq.texas.gov. So that's IP comment without an E. I'm going to go through our proposed revisions now and just kind of quickly talk about what those revisions entail. So first of all, we are we're adding some pH screening procedures to our IPs, and this is to incorporate procedures that we've already implemented through an agreement with EPA. That agreement was in order to satisfy some objections that they had to permits, and we are screening only major facilities, major municipal facilities. Those are facilities with flow of 1 MGD or higher, and industrial facilities with processed wastewater, and those facilities, only those facilities that discharge directly to a classified segments are subject to these screening procedures. And if you look on our webpage, you'll find a freshwater screening calculation spreadsheet and a saltwater screening calculation spreadsheet. I encourage you to look at those spreadsheets. You can download those and enter your own data in there and kind of play around with it and see how it works. We have revised our whole effluent toxicity procedures, and this is partly to account for reasonable potential determination for toxicity agreement that we had with EPA, and also just a wholesale update of those procedures that have been needed because our 2010 IPs, which is our current version, the wet portion of that 2010 IPs was not approved. So this is to update those procedures, and hopefully we'll get EPA approval on that and get that current in our revised procedures. We are updating Appendix B. This is the appendix that includes federally listed aquatic dependent endangered species. We are adding some species like the Texas hornshell mussel, the Salado salamander, the Jollyville salamander, the sharpnose and small eye shiner, the Georgetown salamander, and we are removing the concho water snake because that one was delisted. We are updating Appendix C. This is our critical low flows and harmonic mean flows for classified segments. And if you look on our webpage, we include an updated Appendix C. However, that appendix, so we had that Appendix C updated, and it's been a couple years since those updates were done, and so we're updating it one more time just to get the most updated information that we can possibly have in there, looking at the latest information from USGS gauge data. Appendix D, this is classified segment ambient water quality values. We're updating this information, and again, if you look on our web page, you'll see updates, and there are more updates coming. It's not, that appendix is not completely updated just yet, but we anticipate that we'll get that completed by September of this year. And so stay tuned for more updates, but look at it right now to see a lot of it has been updated already. Appendix E, minimum analytical levels and suggested analytical methods. The TCEQ solicited comments from stakeholders on November 15th, 2019 regarding the draft version of Appendix E of the IPs, revised to incorporate the US EPA's 2017 Methods Update Rule, or MIRR for short. The MIRR resulted in changes in the approved analytical methods and minimum levels included in Title 40 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 136. TCEQ accepted stakeholder comments through December 30th, 2019. Following stakeholder comments, TCEQ staff reevaluated the proposed minimum analytical levels, further researched analytical methods, and consulted TCEQ's Sugarland Lab for input. The TCEQ's response to stakeholder comments and subsequent revisions to the draft Appendix E were sent to stakeholders on July 16th. Stakeholders have 30 days from July 16th to provide additional comments. So please provide feedback or comments regarding the draft Appendix E no later than the close of business, August 17th, 2020, and send your comments to the following email box: wq-mur@tceq.texas.gov, and Texas is spelled out. Moving on with other changes, in our section entitled Establishing Permit Limits for Toxic Pollutants Without Criteria, we're making a small change here to remove the lipid correction factor from calculations identified for deriving human health. So this is this update is on our IP's webpage, and this is just to make this calculation consistent with current federal and state practice. We are considering the inclusion of bioequivalency factors, or BEFs for short. So we're considering the use of these BEFs when screening for dioxin and benzofurans in permit applications, similar to the way we'd use partitioning coefficients. If reasonable potential for toxicity is found, then the BEFs could be used to calculate permit limits. Incorporation of these factors adjusts for the fact that some of these congeners have very low potential for bioaccumulation. This incorporation of BEFs is, this would incorporate the BEFs found in 40 CFR Part 143, Appendix F, Table 2. And finally, TDS screening calculations. We're considering incorporating the use of biomonitoring regional potential for toxicity to establish ionic balance for chlorides and sulfate. So we would take a look at, so essentially there's two things we're looking for with TDS. We want to make sure that we're not harming the aquatic environment, and we want to make sure that we're not exceeding our water quality standards. So by looking at the biomonitoring reasonable potential, we can satisfy that first part to determine whether the ions might have a deleterious effect on the aquatic life in the receiving stream. So this is something that we're currently doing. We've gotten EPA acceptance of this, unofficial EPA acceptance of this, and so we might just memorialize that and put it into the IPs. And the way we do this is to, if we have a discharge to an unclassified segment, we look at the reasonable potential. If there's no reasonable potential for toxicity, then we could surmise that the anions for chloride and sulfate are not out of balance. And so that could allow us to bypass the need to screen for chloride and sulfate, and we would screen for total dissolved solids only. However, we still need to screen for those chlorides and sulfates at the segment using the segment harmonic mean flow to ensure that we're not exceeding water quality standards in that segment. So, and then you heard about our plastics earlier. David Galindo spoke about plastics, and we may have some incorporation of plastics into our IPs to address changes to the standards, but that kind of remains to be determined. So stay tuned on that. Please visit our webpage, our IPs webpage, and like I said earlier, type in the search bar, type in implementation procedures. It'll take you to our webpage, and you can look for our latest information on our IPs changes. And if you have any comments, I encourage you to send those comments to our IP comment webpage, or not webpage, our IP comment email address. Yeah, email address at ipcoment@tceq.texas.gov. And that concludes my updates for the IPs.
All right, thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. So now we've come to the portion of the meeting where we'll now respond to questions that we have received thus far. Also, we'll just take them in the order that they were received. So first off, we've got a plastics question for David, and the question is, for individual permits in the system now, are they held up until decisions are made on plastics? So in other words, I'm assuming that talking about applications that are currently in-house at TCEQ, or are these applications being held up until we make final decisions on plastics? David?
Okay. No, we actually are going to move forward with issuing those individual permits. and we'll include a reopener clause language in there. So that way, once we do have language developed, we can do a staff-initiated amendment to open those permits back up and include more stringent requirements in those permits.
All right, thank you, David. We got one more, or at least one more question on plastics for you. The question reads, also, have technologies been identified for zero discharge of no visible plastics similar to BACT?
No, we're not proposing technology-based limits. We're proposing a change to the water quality standards, and so it would be a water quality-based limit, which would also allow a compliance period potentially. So no, we have not evaluated any technologies that would be suitable for achieving zero discharge of plastics.
All right, thank you, David. Next question is related to the water treatment plant GPs. The question is, will the new water treatment plant GP exclude treatment of produced water from the GP? And I don't know if Laura, you've got
Yes. So to answer that question, the water treatment plant general permit is specific to conventional water treatment plants. And so it only authorizes wastewater related to the conventional treatment of water treatment plant wastewater. So it's going to include wastewater from facilities that use the normal conventional treatment process. Again, this is water treatment, not wastewater treatment facilities. So this is your drinking water plants. To my knowledge, no water treatment plants are using produced water to generate public drinking water. So the answer is no, the general permit, the water treatment plant general permit will not, it will not allow produced water discharges through that general permit.
All right, thank you, Laurie. Our next question, let me cue it up here, has to do with accommodations during this COVID period, and specifically if we allow for draft permits to be emailed from TCQ to the applicant or the permittee via email versus regular mail. And I'm not quite as familiar about the response or answer to that question, so I'm going to ask for volunteers on that one.
I saw Lori raise her hand.
Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, Greg, what I think the question is getting at is if applicants need to submit their applications to the agency, can those be emailed instead of mailed, U.S. postal mail? And I believe the answer is yes, we can accept them, although you have to be careful because our email system has a maximum size that it allows as an attachment. In the event that you do email it to us, it would need to be followed up with a hard copy anyways. So just, sorry. So you are going to have to mail a copy to us. You could email it, but again, there's size limitations on our email.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, actually, I did get clarification on that question from the questioner, and they did say that actually they are asking about the stage in the process where the draft permit is ready, or TCQ has drafted the permit and is ready for the applicant to review it, and can that step be done by email versus mailing it to the permittee, them providing comments and mailing back? Can it be an email exchange versus a regular mail exchange? And I think I saw somewhere else someone said that we are doing that currently. So so I think the answer is yes, we do allow that. But if anyone, any of the presenters want to chime in if I'm wrong about that, go ahead and speak up.
Greg, yes, we started using email to, this is Laurie, we started using email to send the draft permits out to applicants for review, I believe last year, like fall of last year, we started using email to submit the draft permit to the applicants for review, and applicants, I believe, have been emailing their comments back to us. So that's significantly shortened the amount of time that's needed for draft review and acceptance. So we were doing that prior to the pandemic.
Great, thank you, Lori. Next question related to the APO topic. And I think maybe this was for you, Shelby. The question is, where was the APO program transferred to again? I believe you had a statement in your presentation that the program was transferring from our division to another program. If you could reiterate that, please.
Sure, Greg. It was transferred over to the Permitting and Registration Support Division in the Office of Waste.
Great, thank you, Shelby. Got another water treatment plant general permit question for Lori. Would the water treatment plant general permit go into effect if approved October 7th, 2020?
Yes, if the permit gets issued on October 7th, it would go into effect on that same, well, it would go into effect on the date that it's signed. So when we go to Commissioner's agenda, they will adopt it, but then there's an actual signature that goes on the document. So sometimes it takes up to a week for the commissioners to actually sign the document. And so it goes into effect upon its signature. So it may not be exactly October 7th, but it'll be probably within a week of October 7th.
All right, thank you, Lori. Next question, I believe, relates to the electronic reporting waiver topic. The question is, what if we have not received these waivers for our permittees? And the next question is similar to that from a different person. What if we have not received our waivers yet? Okay,
we sent those out in April, June 11th. And so you should have received your waiver in the mail. Again, those waivers were sent out to permittees who had their permits issued after February 1st of 2016. So if your permit was issued prior to February 1st, 2016, it does not require the electronic reporting. Those requirements were never added to your permit. So you would not have got one. If your permit was issued after February 1st, 2016, you should have gotten one. If you didn't, we have received a number of those back in the mail as undeliverable. We either don't have an accurate address for you or something of that nature. We've had a number of them returned to us. So my recommendation, if you think you should have got a waiver and you did not get a waiver, you can send an email to me and I can verify if you were supposed to have one or not. And if you were supposed to have one and it got returned to us, we can get a accurate address for you and get that sent back out. My email is Laurie, L-A-U-R-I-E .fleet, that's F as in Fred, L-E-E-T, at tceq.texas.gov.
Thank you, Lori. I've got another related question on the electronic waiver topic. Just to confirm, electronic reporting for pre-treatment is waived until December 2023. Lori?
Yes, for the pre-treatment annual report, the waiver is good through December of 2023. The biosolids waiver is good through December of this year, so December of 2020.
All right, thanks. Stay near, Laura. I think this next one's for you as well. Is a copy of the MOU with the Railroad Commission available online?
Yes, it is. Because those are rulemakings, they are available under our rules. So if you go to the TCEQ homepage, that MOU is actually 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 7.117. Again, that's 30 TAC 7.117. So that's where you'll find the TCEQ Railroad Commission Memorandum of Agreement. And I think the next one's for me too, so I'll just, Greg, if you're all right with it, I'll just read the question and continue on. Will there be an opportunity for public review of the Npds application before it goes to EPA? There will not be an opportunity for public review prior to submittal to EPA. However, as part of EPA's process for reviewing and either approving or denying our application, EPA is required to seek public comment. So the federal rules lay out the process as, you know, the governor submits our application to EPA, and then from there EPA has 30 days to review it for completeness to make sure that it contains all of the necessary components. If they determine that it is complete, then they will review it and determine whether to approve it or deny it. And during that process, they will be publishing it in the notice in the Federal Register and soliciting public review and comment on their decision to approve or deny. So just to reiterate, no public review prior to submitting to EPA, but after it's submitted to EPA, EPA will be going through a public review and comment process if our application is deemed complete.
Thank you, Lori. Next question, I believe I'll give this one to Dr. Johnson. Will there be any additional stakeholder meetings covering the Appendix E MALs? And Sarah, if you need to pass this to Peter, feel free.
All right, so at this time, we don't have any planned additional stakeholder meetings. We are waiting to see what kind of public comments we receive regarding the revision to Appendix E that we just sent out to stakeholders. So depending on the feedback that we get, we'll reevaluate if another stakeholder meeting is warranted. So, but at this time, we don't have anything planned.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. The next question I'll go ahead and field. Are you going to talk about COVID accommodations? I covered that earlier in the meeting, although I unfortunately dropped out just as I was ending it, but real quick I'll recap what I went over. So TCEQ offices are closed to the public right now, so unfortunately we can't receive applications delivered by courier or hand delivered to the agency, but we'll still accept them by regular mail. We do encourage electronic applications, copies of those to be sent as well, but bottom line is we still have to process the applications via physical hard copies. So we do still take those by mail, regular mail. Also, for instances where a permittee or applicant needs to post copies of their application and draft permits in a public location, if those locations are closed to the public, we do allow for applicants to post those materials on a publicly accessible website, and so we'll work with each individual applicant case by case with their particular situation. And lastly, we're also holding, if a public meeting for an application is requested and granted by the commission, we can hold that public meeting virtually or online as opposed to in person. And so that's another way of helping our application processing procedures or process move forward in spite of some of these obstacles. So, All right, we'll move on to the next question, which is, Greg, will you be providing your comment about the Covet? Well, I guess it's the same question. So hopefully that addresses it, what I just mentioned. Next question. This is back to plastics. For David, I assume the plastic regulations apply to industrial permits / facilities. David?
Yes, that's correct. It'll apply to facility manufacturers of plastics, and then it will also apply to facilities which handle plastics or that form plastics using those plastic pellets. So the facilities that are handling plastics and not actually generating them, they're mostly going to be covered under the multi-sector general permit, and so for those facilities it would be a matter of updating their stormwater pollution prevention plans to include BMPs to control plastics. And so, but yes, the answer to your question is that it's going to be industrial facilities.
Thank you, David. Next question, and I'll take this one. Will this presentation be available for viewing online at a later date? The answer is yes. We will post a recording of this presentation to the TCEQ YouTube channel, which can be looked up easily if you're in the YouTube application, or we've got an address for the channel down near the bottom of our of the meeting agenda. Next question: Can we stop sending hard copies of permit applications? That uses a lot of paper. Actually, David, if you don't mind, I'm going to pass that one to you.
Okay. No, at this time, we still require, our rules still require paper copies be submitted to the agency. We are aware of the amount of paper that it takes, or how much paper is included in an application, but currently we are required to receive hard copies of that, of those applications. We did, during this COVID period, we are accepting electronic copies as well as the paper copies. So an electronic copy is encouraged. If you would like to submit the electronic copy, it may actually speed up the review, since we can handle, or we could route that to different teams for review simultaneously, and so that way when the paper copy does come across the reviewer's desk, they will already be familiar with it, and that may speed up the process. But answer to your question is currently we have to still receive hard copies.
Sarah, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Just to add on to that, if you do want to submit an application electronically, to Lori's earlier point, emails are limited with file attachments. However, the TCEQ does have its own FTPS site where you can upload larger files and then email us a link. And this is the only file transferring site that we're allowed to use. So if you do want to submit an electronic copy of your application and you have a lot of images, or it's a really large file, go to the TCEQ website and just search file transfer, and it will direct you to our own FTPS site where you can upload those large files for us.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Next question. Does TCEQ grant extensions to allow pre-treatment programs to complete inspections due to COVID-19 if needed? And I'm not sure who actually to give that question to. David, do you happen to know that, or?
Yes, we have had some permittees reach out to us because of the COVID issue and not being able to perform their inspections of their indirect dischargers. And so that is actually going to require a request for enforcement discretion. And so the request would need to include the reasons, the specifics of why the control authority is unable to perform those functions. And so if you'd like more information on that, please reach out to me at 512-563-3909, and I'd be glad to direct you to where you can make that request for enforcement discretion.
Thank you, David. Next question is for Peter. It reads, Peter said that reasonable potential can be used in lieu of sulfate and chloride screening. What if the permittee does not do biomonitoring? Peter?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, there are two possibilities here. If this is a municipal facility and they don't do biomonitoring, then they're going to be less than 1 MGD and not subject to TDS screening requirements anyway. However, if they're an industrial facility that does not have biomonitoring, then we will have to go ahead and screen for chloride and sulfate.
All right, thank you, Peter. Next question, are the sludge reporting requirements in your domestic wastewater permit still reported through the Net Dmr system, or are those waived for this year? Lori, you want to?
Yes. So they are not waived. So if you have, right now we put our sludge outfalls in the Net Dmr system. So you are required to continue using the Net Dmr system for those outfalls. If you fail to use the Net Dmr system, it will flag it as a DMR non-receipt, which is a violation. So we are not waiving the sludge Net Dmr outfalls. The only part that's waived for this year is the paper portion of your annual report. So you go into Net Dmr, you submit some information there, but you also follow that up with a paper document that has things like your analytical results and your certification statements, those sort of things. The only thing that's waived is that paper portion of your annual report. Continue to use the Net Dmr system for those outfalls, those sludge outfalls. Back to you, Greg.
Thank you, Lori. And this may be the last question, COVID-related question. If draft permits aren't available to the public for viewing at the chief clerk's office, and COVID restrictions are prohibited for traveling to location like library or public building where applicant placed a copy of draft permit, how can public get a copy of the draft permit to review? So I'll read that one more time. If draft permits aren't available to the public for viewing, chief clerk's office and COVID restrictions are prohibited for traveling to public location where applicant placed a copy of the draft permit, how can the public get a copy of the draft permit to review? Anyone care to field that one? I don't think I have an answer for that, but maybe David or Lori, I don't know if you.
So Greg, that's related to the accommodation that you mentioned earlier. If a location is closed, the permittee can submit that to the TCEQ, submit those documents to us, and then we can publish those on our website. I believe the link to that information is available through the COVID-19 link that's on our homepage. And so anytime that a permittee is not able to place those types of documents in the public viewing location, they can work with the agency to have those documents published, again, on our website. And that includes things like the draft permit, their application, and the public notice.
Thank you, David. And it looks like we had a little clarification on an earlier question for you, Peter, about the chloride and sulfite screening. It sounds like the context of that earlier question was that the permittee is a municipal facility that has a final permit limit greater than 1 MGD, but is currently operating at less than 1 MGD. So, Peter, I don't know if that distinction changes your response any or not.
Yeah, we would still screen that facility for any phases greater than 1 MGD, and if they haven't started biomonitoring yet, then we have no reasonable potential information to go by, and so we would not be able to bypass those chloride and sulfate screenings.
Thank you, Peter. And the next question is, can you please repeat the email address where we can submit an individual permit application to? And I have to admit, I don't recall if someone did mention that, who it was. So if someone wants to jump in on that one, I'd appreciate it. So again, can you please repeat the email address where people can submit an individual application to?
So I would suggest that they email our applications review and processing team, and that email address is wq-arpteam@tceq.texas.gov.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. That is, looks like that's all the questions we have. So we'll go ahead and move towards the close of the meeting. And before we do, just had a couple announcements to make you aware of that are actually listed near the bottom of the meeting agenda document. First is the next Water Quality Advisory Workgroup meeting will be scheduled for October 20th, 2020. That's a Tuesday, and it'll be set at a start time of 1:30 p.m. At this point, we don't know, can't tell into the future whether we'll be able to meet in person or continue to do these meetings virtually. So stay tuned for those details. We'll let you know as we get closer to that date how we're going to, or what the format of the meeting is going to be. And then the second announcement has to do with the next House Bill 2771 stakeholder meeting. That one is scheduled for Thursday, September 17th, 2020, and that will be at 9:30 in the morning. And if you want to get added to the stakeholder list for those meetings, please send an email to hb2771@tceq.texas.gov. That's hb2771@tceq.texas.gov. And with that, I believe that's all that we have for you this afternoon. We appreciate you hanging with us as we went through all this subject matter, and especially as we're trying out this new platform for the virtual meeting. So thank you for your time, and we hope everyone stays safe and well. And at this point, we officially have adjourned the meeting. Thank you. Take care.